Welcome and good afternoon. My name is Kamish Orr, and today we are going to continue a series of videos that I'm doing on out distribution, ground out distribution, using retro sheet play-by-play data from the 2022 Major League Baseball season. My last video was what happens when there's a runner on first base. What is the ground out distribution? How often do double plays happen? That kind of thing. Today, we are adding another base runner to the mix, and we're going to take a look at the ground out distribution with runners on first and second. So I'm very curious to see how often plays are made at third base, for example, whether the added runner leads to more double play, the higher percentage of ground out double plays, or what else may occur here. The other interesting thing is with runners on first and second, my guess is the shift probably doesn't come into play nearly as much since the fielders have to be more normally positioned with the runner on second also. So hopefully you enjoy. Drop some any comments that you have down in the comments, or if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer those. I did do a video on how to download this data yourself from RetroSheet. So go check that out if you're curious about how I'm getting access to this information. It's publicly available for free. In any event, let's get to it. All right, folks. Well, I'm guessing this video will be a little shorter than the last video that I did, which was runner on first ground outs. That video I went into a lot more explanation on the percentages and such. But in this video, I think what I'm going to do is just highlight some of the differences or some of the things that stand out to me. If you want to check out the prior video to get a more in-depth breakdown of percentages, specifically by each type of play, feel free to do that. I'll leave a link to that one that you can click on to get to that other video with runners on first. But runners on first and second, I'm just going to kind of give you the highlights. I'll probably still highlight some percentages and that kind of thing as I notice there's interesting things to talk about. And I guess before I get too far into this, let me explain what you're going to be looking at here. What I've done is, as I said, I've gone to RetroSheet, I've gotten their play-by-play data, and then I've filtered it out so that I can really only focus on those ground outs where there were runners on first and second base. And I'm breaking that down into two different types of plays. One, those runner on first and second with less than two out, and then runner on first and second with two outs, because obviously there's a difference there. When you're not shooting for a double play, I wanted to see what the difference was in how that final out of the inning gets made. So a little brief explanation for those of you who may not have watched the first video. What you see here is the actual number of each type of play. I have this separated out by fielding position. The fielding position is the fielder who first has that first assist or put out. Usually it's the first assist. So usually it's the fielder that touched the ball first, that fielded the ball first. So that's what you see across the top here. And then along the side, you see the different types of outs. And I've grouped some that I'll talk about, because there are some where there's, like if it's a rundown or something like that, where it doesn't really fit the mold of the normal plays as much. But those are very, very rare, actually. So they don't really change the percentages any, if that makes sense. They're negligible for the most part. The other thing I'll mention is that these are the final results. So what I don't have is if there were ground outs, double play balls, and the double play was broken up by the runner or for whatever reason, or the batter beat out the throw to first. I don't have that kind of data. So there may be cases where it was really they were trying to turn two and just weren't able to complete the double play. And that won't show up in the double play section, obviously, because there wasn't a double play result. This is just the final result from each of the plays. So you have the raw numbers up here for each type of play. For example, the upper section here is ground double plays. So you have just your standard whatever fielder to 6 or 4 to 3, the traditional standard double play. Right below that, because we're dealing with runners on first and second, are double play balls where the first out of the double play is made at third base. And then finally you have unassisted where they start unassisted. So the shortstop fields the ball, steps on second, for example, and throws it to first. Would be an unassisted double play, if you will. It's not fully unassisted since he's throwing to first, but that first put out's unassisted, and that's what you see there. The next section is when there's force out at second. So that means less than 2 outs, and there's a force at second. Usually, in most cases, that's a throw to either the shortstop or second baseman who's covering second. Unassisted again means either the shortstop or second baseman took it to the bag themselves, but it's not a double play, it's just a single force out. Below that, we have force outs at third. So with runners on first and second, how often is there a force out where a fielder throws the ball to third base? And then, of course, unassisted to third. Balls hit to the third baseman who steps on third for an out. And then finally, the last type of out is when they just get the batter out. So with runners on first and second, less than 2 outs, they're just getting the batter out. They're not trying to get the force out at either second or third base. And again, most of those are going to be throws to the first baseman. Occasionally there's throws to the pitcher covering first. And then below that are the unassisted plays where the first baseman, most cases the first baseman, is getting the batter out at first by himself. So that's the raw totals up here. Below that, we have the percentages. And the way you read this is, within each section, the percentage represents the percentage of plays of that type that are of that category. So, for example, in pitcher cases where the pitcher is fielding the ball, 95% of the time on a double play, he's turning the double play 1 to 6 or 4 to 3. So he's throwing to the shortstop or second baseman covering second, who then throws to first for the out. So that's happening almost every time that the pitcher is involved in the double play there. The 4.44% represents how often the pitcher's throwing to third base for the first out of a double play. And usually those are 1 to 5 to 3, if you will. So that's what the percentages mean. Then the total down here, this 40.18%, is the total of all plays fielded by that position that results in that type of out. So 40% of plays fielded by the pitcher result in double plays. And again, that's with runners on first and second and less than 2 outs. Almost 20% are force outs at second, and a little over 40% are just thrown to first for the out. So that's how you read that. The other thing, if you look way over in the total section, you can see the overall totals of that type of out in this section. So 78% of double plays, regardless of who's fielding them, are your traditional whatever to 6 to 3 or whatever to 4 to 3 double plays. 7.5% are double plays started at third base for the first out, and then just almost 14% are unassisted. They start unassisted before they throw to first for the for the second out of the double play. And then again, the total section shows you the total of all plays with runners on first and second and less than 2 out that result in that type of result. So 47%, almost half of all outs, ground outs, I should say, with a runner on first and second and less than 2 outs result in double plays, and so on. So that's just, I wanted to just give you again kind of an overview of how you would read this. That's how I'm deriving the data. So let's get to some highlights and analysis. Now, if we go back to the runner on first with runner on first ground outs, there were a little over 7,000 groundouts with runner on first only. There are way less than that, 2,670 groundouts with runners on first and second total. So we're already talking about, a third of, even less, a third of the total number of groundouts with runners on first. There's a third of that total with runners on first and second. So, which makes sense because there's less cases where there's a runner on first and second than there is just a runner on first. So that's just something to keep in mind. We're dealing with less or fewer plays overall. The other interesting thing, there were some oddball rare plays that I just want to highlight. There were 2 cases where there was a ground out to left field, where the left fielder made the play, made the first out of a ground out. And my guess is that's with the runners on first and second. There's a sharp ground ball through the infield, and the left fielder's fielding it and throwing to third, for example, to get the ground out. So there were just 2 of those cases, 2 total plays in all of 2022. Again, I'm using 2022 stats. All of 2022 that were that case. There were 2 triple plays, and those 2 triple plays were both around the horn, 5 to 4 to 3, where the third baseman steps on third, throws to second, then throws to first for a triple play. So the 2 cases of triple plays were those. And then there were some what I call oddball double plays. There were 4 cases where it was a 4 to 3 to 6 double play. Second baseman throws to the first baseman for the first out, who then throws to short for the second out. And there was one 4 to 4 to 6 double play, which I'm guessing was a ball hit to the second baseman who tags the runner before throwing. Well, I'm not sure what that would be, because if he tagged the runner, he tags the runner and then gets the lead runner out by throwing to the shortstop, for example. So there's just one case of that. So just a couple of, I'll just give you a little bit of the overall breakdown, though, of how this compares to just runners on first. First of all, first basemen see more plays overall. So with a runner on first, a first baseman started ground out or fielded the first of a ground out 10% of the time, 10% of plays. Whereas with runners on first and second, the first baseman was the first fielder in 15% of the plays. So 5% more plays, the first baseman was the first fielder. And again, that could be, I think a lot of these are probably because of the shift with a runner on first that you don't see with runners on first and second. So with runner on first only, the shift could be on, so the first baseman's probably playing closer to the bag, and so he's not going after as many ground balls as he would when the infield is more spread out. Second and third basemen see fewer plays, just a couple of percentage less than when there's just a runner on first. And shortstops see a few more plays, a few more percent of plays when there's a runner than when there's just a runner on first. And again, my guess is a lot of the differences in percentages are because of the lack of shift with a runner on first and second. So that's just something I thought was interesting. So as we see here, 15% of total outs were first fielded by the first baseman, whereas with a runner on first, it was 10.81%, and so on. So that was one interesting piece that I noticed. So a couple of other interesting notes. Again, a lot of the percentages overall were fairly similar to a runner on first, just a runner on first. Not a huge swing overall in terms of the double play percentages and all of that. But one thing I wanted to point out, 70% of ground ball double plays hit to first base were 3-6-1 double plays. So again, if we look at the first baseman, we see about 16% of balls hit to the first baseman result in double plays. And of those, about 70% of those were 3-6-1 double plays. So the first baseman, who's probably not playing as close to first base, fields it, he throws to short for the first out, and then the shortstop's throwing back to the pitcher who's covering first for the second out. So I thought that was interesting. That was a higher percentage than I was expecting. If we look at the third baseman, we see that 30% of balls fielded by the third baseman that result in double plays, he's taking the first out to the bag to third base himself before throwing to first, for example. 70% of the time, a little over 70%, is just a traditional 5-4 or 6, well, mostly 5-4 to 3 double plays. There were a couple of cases of 5 to 6 to 3 double plays, but for the most part, when fielders are hitting the ball that way, the shortstop is playing in a traditional position too far away from second to cover second for a double play ball. That being said, 5% of the double plays hit to third base were 5 to 4 double plays. So instead of him stepping on third and then throwing over to first, he's stepping on third and throwing to second base for the double play. The others were all, again, these were ones hit to third base. The other 95%, were either a 5 to 4 to 3 standard or unassisted 5 to 3. So very interesting. There was, as I said before, there was only one play, let me back up. The force plays at third. Overall, I think I can say, if we look at the numbers, we see that overall, almost no fielder is throwing to third base to get the lead runner. It almost never happens. There were 5 total cases with less than 2 out where a fielder, other than the third baseman, threw to third base to start the double play. 2 of those were by a pitcher. So the pitcher fields it probably on that side of the bag and throws to third for the first out. 2 by the catcher. Again, probably because the throw to second's a lot longer than the throw to third. If he's trying for a double play, he's probably going to third with it. And then there was one case of the first baseman throwing to third, which I thought was interesting. So only 5 cases, 5 total plays where they're trying for the lead runner at third base for that double play. Likewise, if we come down here, we see almost no plays to third base with 2 outs with runners on first and second. There were 4 cases where the shortstop threw third for the final out of the inning. Now that's of course balls hit to the third baseman break that rule. When a ball's hit to the third baseman, obviously there's more of a chance that he's going to start at third base, either with that first double play out, or he's going to take it to third himself for the final out of the inning. But other than those cases, so if you remove the third baseman from the equation in terms of the first fielder, almost never does a fielder throw to third base for an out, no matter what the situation. So I thought that was interesting. Again, double play percentage I thought didn't really go up. I was expecting that the double play percentage might be higher with runners on first and second because you have an extra base runner. I don't know why I would think that, but As I said, they're not trying to go to third with it in most cases for the first out of the double play. They're still going the traditional double play most of the time. So I guess it shouldn't be surprising that that the double play percentage really didn't change much. And overall, out distribution is pretty similar, as I said, to when there's just a runner on first. As we can see, once again, almost 30% of plays or of double plays hit to third base were started unassisted at third. Let's see. With less than 2 out, 12% of balls hit to the third base are unassisted at third overall, whether to start a double play or to get the force out. 20% are forced at second. These are balls hit to third base. And 15%, they're throwing the batter out. So that's a little interesting. So let's talk about runner on first and second with 2 outs now. So there's no double play chance involved here now. And what we can see is that the percentages are pretty much what we would expect. Again, almost never, for total plays, the shortstop threw to third to get that force out. No other fielder threw to third to get the force out to end the inning. 64 times the third baseman, took it to third himself for the final out. But again, if you remove him from the equation, nobody else is throwing that way. So yeah, with 2 out, a quarter of balls hit to third base are unassisted at third. Right? Almost 22% are force outs at second. So the third baseman's thrown to second base for the force out. And then a little over half, he's thrown to first to get the batter out at first. So that's an interesting breakdown, I thought. Yeah, just to reiterate, there were only 19 total plays that were force outs at third. 19 total. 1%. So 1% of plays with less than 2 outs were force outs at third. And less than 1%, like 1/3%, were force outs at third with 2 outs. So it almost never happens. 24% of plays were force outs at second to end the inning. 24.15%. And 20% of those were unassisted. So either the shortstop or second baseman steps on the bag at second to end the inning. So again, 20% of plays where the inning ends at second base were unassisted. Pretty interesting stuff. So I think those were pretty much the highlights. You may find stuff in here that I didn't mention or stuff that would be interesting to you. So feel free to pause the video to take a look at some of these breakdowns a little bit if you're interested in that. And check out my other video if you want to see the runner on first breakdowns. I may try to leave a way in the comments for you to actually look at this Google sheet so you can take a look at it that way. But yeah, if you have any questions or comments, please leave those down below, and I'm happy to read those and respond. And as I said, you'll probably find things in here that I didn't mention. I just kind of try to pull the highlights or things that stuck out to me, but other things may stick out to you. If you like the video, consider giving it a like. It does help more people see it. Consider subscribing to the channel if you want to see more breakdowns like this. I know it's not for everybody by any means, but I find it interesting. I think there's probably a percentage of people out there that also find it interesting. So feel free to subscribe if you want to see more of that. I plan to continue this series. My first video actually was on bunt distribution. So the second video, again, runner on first with just a runner on first. Now we're doing runner on first and second. And in the future, I'm going to be doing other runner situations. So I may do bases loaded next. I'll probably do bases loaded next. The other options would be to do like just runner on second, for example, just runner on third. So those are the other cases where you might have something. And then I may take a look at how often runners a runner on first gets to third base on a single, for example, or how often a runner on second scores on a single. So I may look at different types of plays like that as well. So if you have something in particular that you're interested in me taking a look at and analyzing, you can leave those in the comments as well. I do have a league, the Baseball Maelstrom, that's my Payoff Pitch Solo League, that is very interesting to check out, where 3 teams in the American League and 3 teams in the National League are made up of Hall of Famers. 1 team in each league is made up of players from that league not in the Hall of Fame. And so 8 teams total, 4 American League, 4 National League, battling it out. 54-game season, so a third of the regular season. Getting close to the All-Star break. So you have a chance to vote in my on my All-Star ballots. I'll leave a link for that down below as well. If you have interest in that, check out the stats. Vote for the starters, the All-Star starters for the league, and then I'm going to play that game. I'll stream that game. I don't know if it'll be a live stream or just record myself playing that game for upload so you can see how that shakes out. I'm also going to do a home run derby prior to the game. So that'll be something to check out as well. With all that said, I appreciate you watching. Thanks so much. If you have other ideas for videos, let me know. And until next time, have a great evening.